Without further ado, our first presentation is 8 Avoidable Errors for World-Class Food and Beverage Equipment Reliability, led by Les Sifko, former Director, Productivity Engineering and CI at PepsiCo. The session will focus on practical scenarios where Les will spotlight 8 key maintenance avoidable errors and their consequences. Drawing from years of experience in progressive operation roles in food and beverage, he navigates through the importance of leadership, CMMS, maintenance KPIs, spare parts, scheduling, loss analysis, training, and production, as he takes you on the journey towards achieving world-class equipment reliability. A little bit about Les's background. He has over 25 years of experience in continuous improvement, including 16 years at PepsiCo. He has consulted process improvement methodologies internationally in the automotive, airline, business startup, and consumer packaged good industries. Les has worked with companies encompassing a broad range of commodities, including food and beverage, medical research, sheet metal stamping, and assembly of automotive parts. He is a speaker and instructor in teaching the tools and techniques of Lean Six Sigma and TPM. He is a double certified Lean Six Sigma Master Black Belt. He also holds an MBA and honors BSc from the University of Toronto. Just a reminder that after Les has finished his presentation, we will open the virtual floor for any questions. If you have any questions during or after the presentation, please post them in the Zoom questions box below. Over to you, Les.
Well, great. Thanks, Mario. Well, hello, everyone. I'm Les Sifko. I'm thrilled to be here. When Mario invited me to talk at this seminar today, this afternoon, I was looking for a good topic. You need to have a good topic. You got to start with something thrilling. What came into my mind was, what you need to do in order to build a good world-class maintenance system. But I thought, I like sports a lot, and a lot of the issues in sports often stem from unforced errors or avoidable errors as much as it is, not doing the basics. So I thought I'd take that approach. It's sort of they're intertwined, but we'll talk about 8 avoidable errors for world-class food and beverage equipment reliability. I just want to say this is very much grounded in over 25 years experience in the industry, including, in various capacities, leading maintenance teams. What I find is, and having been a plant director at PepsiCo, what I find is a lot of times downtime and inefficiencies are really based on and rooted in unforced errors, things that we should be doing and we're not doing. And you often heard control the controllables. And this is very much in line with that. There are things that you should be doing in order to maintain a world-class system. And if you're not doing those key things, then if you're running well, you're probably lucky more than you are good. And what we want to talk about today is how to move from being lucky to being good, reliable, sustainable, repeatable. You drive into your facilities and you're going to be running well, as opposed to Monday morning, you're driving into your facility and it's a wild guess as to what you're going to face. And more than likely, you're even thinking it'll be a disaster like it is every Monday for many factories and plants, in particular, if you're not running 24/7 and your startup is Monday morning. So let's move to the next slide. So this is what you'll learn today: 8 errors to avoid to take your maintenance department from good to great. What is a best maintenance department? What is a typical maintenance department? And the topics overall through the lens of 8 avoidable errors is: what is the goal of a plant? What does success look like for a plant? What role does maintenance play towards that goal? And what does a great maintenance department look like? So all through the lens of 8 avoidable errors. So let's start with what a plant does. Essentially, a plant converts raw materials, inputs, into finished goods, outputs. So very much like in a Lean Six Sigma world, some of you have heard of SIPOC, supplier, input, process, output, customer. Well, the process is the plant. And, let's be real here. Plants typically cost a lot of money to build, millions of dollars to build. There's a lot of capital invested in a plant. Sometimes we forget that. So there's an expectation, although plants are typically not a profit center, plants are cost centers, and there's an expectation that not only does a plant run well below, or at least below, the budget that's allotted to the plant from an operational perspective, but even further lower than that to recoup a lot of the capital investment that was used up to build the plant in the first place, or a particular line, or whatever the case may be. So, and all that being said, if that wasn't hard enough and daunting enough a task, plants have to run with 100% safety, with the goal of 100% quality, obviously meeting all the food safety regulations, 100% employee engagement, and driving to zero waste. It's a lot. So for a food plant to be successful, it has to comply again with OSHA safety regulations. Obviously, GMP, the FDA or equivalent in whatever jurisdiction you may be in, and food safety regulations. The equipment has to be reliable. Nothing worse than walking into a plant that is basically a parking lot. The lines aren't running, and I think pretty much, you all know what I mean by that. Motivated and engaged employees, and you can tell by walking a plant if that's the case, and operate sustainably. So sustainably here is everything from the environmental perspective. Obviously, you want to protect the wastewater. You want to be zero landfill, and sustainably also means utilizing your energy resources as efficiently as and effectively as possible, as well as sustainably also means cost efficient and cost effective. I've been in plants that have been around for 85 years, the same plant in the same city, employing the same generations of several generations of employees. That's sustainability. That's great for the community and great for everyone, all the stakeholders. So that's really what we're talking about in terms of a successful plant. So how does maintenance fit into this, middle of the SIPOC, this process of converting raw materials into finished goods? Well, maintenance is probably the most important department, I would argue, at least, to ensuring that a plant is successful. And really, in a nutshell, what maintenance does is deliver maximum availability and reliability of all machine assets within the budget that's allotted to maintenance, so at the lowest cost possible. The successful maintenance department must keep equipment running when planned to run. We'll talk a little bit about planned and unplanned downtime, support the plant's safety and quality objectives, and lower cost. All right, so we'll get right into it. 8 avoidable errors for world-class food and beverage equipment reliability. Now, this is not a comprehensive list. I'm sure you'll have some ideas or some thoughts that are maybe in addition to the ones I mentioned. What I'd like to do, though, is start with framing up what a production line, some helpful analogies to looking at a production line. So when I was really young in beverages and in high-speed beverage lines, some of the smartest people in the business, at least I thought so at the time, and I do believe to this day, they often looked at production lines and compared them to airplanes. And so the idea would be that obviously you do a pre-flight at startup, and then you start up your line, and it should run flawlessly without any interruption, like airplane engines, like an airplane in the sky, until you land the plane at the end of the week, and then you do maintenance on the plane at that point, and then you do a pre-flight again, and you start up the line again. So the idea is that, and it's a pretty neat analogy, because the concept is 100% uptime, and we expect that in airplanes. Let's face it, most of us travel, or many of us travel, and we're in an airplane. We expect that plane to make it, right? And planes have come a long way. So if we can do that for airplanes, obviously the business model is a little bit different, but if we can do that for airplanes, then we should be able to do that for our production lines. So that's sort of the goal of the maintenance department, is to kind of think of lines in terms of airplanes. However, I want to introduce a different analogy that I'd like to use for the purpose of this presentation, and that is of a production line being like a river. So a production line is like a river like this. So this is your river, White Rapids, flowing really quick, high-speed production line, whether you're producing chips, soda, whether it's frozen chicken, or whether you're producing snacks or any other type of product in the food and beverage industry. You want your line to be like a river, and if you look at a river, you know, it's pretty reliable, and it's in a very positive equilibrium. It's doing what it's supposed to be doing. So this is sort of like the analogy I'd like to use for today. And let's throw up a cartoon image just to make it a bit fun. So this is the very same river, more or less, and this river is free flowing, and there are no obstacles on this river. So if a production line is a river, and it's supposed to be flowing, I'm not sure if you're all from Canada, or at least some of you are from Canada, but if you're, you know, we have a lot of rivers in Canada, and there's a particular animal that likes to impede the flow of rivers. And if you all guessed a beaver, well, that's exactly it. So in addition to thinking of the production line as a river, I'd like you to picture that every facility, every plant has its share of beavers. And the beaver can build a dam. These virtual beavers, if you will, can build dams on your line, stick by stick. Sometimes it's stick by stick. Sometimes it feels like they build these complex dams pretty quick, I guess, with a bit of teamwork among themselves. And we don't see these beavers. They're virtual beavers, but they do give us signals that the line is the flow of the line is starting to be disrupted, and so these beavers certainly do exist. Now, just as a footnote here, I'm not anti-beaver. So I do actually, I really like beavers, and I think they're important to our ecosystem and everything like that. So I just want to make it, when I say the beaver is the enemy, I don't really mean they're the enemy in real life. I just mean the virtual beavers in the hidden factory, in our factories, those are our enemy. So it's like in Six Sigma, we say variation is the enemy. In this case, that variation, if you will, is made manifest through these hidden beavers in our across our production lines. All right, so this is the real life manifestation of these beavers in the dams. You can see if you follow from sort of anti-clockwise from the left, oops, sorry about that, from the left to the right, you can see how the line is disrupted, nothing's moving. You know, if you for any of you in the beverages industry, you know that when you have a full accumulation of bottles or cans on the line, you know you're backed up. You should have some space there for some buffer, and so you're completely backed up there. So it's like the top diagram. You know, everything is stopped, waiting and waiting and waiting. Sometimes waiting minutes, sometimes waiting hours, shifts, sometimes waiting days for this beaver dam to be busted, if you will, and broken up and eliminated so that you can run again. So this is what we're talking about. So these beaver dams, they create this downtime, they create these stoppages that disrupt the supply chain, that create out of stocks, that wreak havoc on our operation and add cost and anxiety within our buildings. So this is what we're going to unlock as we talk about the without any further ado, the 8 unforced errors. And so here's number 1, not having a CBN. So CBN is compelling business need. And a compelling business need is something that ultimately for maintenance would be the maintenance manager, maybe with the plant manager, plant director, will work on in terms of, you know, it really gets down to the nitty-gritty of what's our goal? What are we looking to accomplish either this year or over the horizon in terms of our maintenance department? What can we rally around in terms of our business need today? Now, the compelling business need obviously should be somewhat aligned to the vision and the mission of the plant. And when I was plant director, for me, the vision was to be the flagship plant in a flagship division, and the mission was 100% employee involvement, 0% loss or waste. So if you want to use that as an example, the compelling business need for maintenance can be 100% capacity or unlocking capacity. It can be proliferation of SKUs. It can be 100% uptime. there are different things you can use. You could be a flagship department in a flagship plant, in a flagship division, something like that. Bringing smiles to your customers, whatever it is, but you have a compelling business need, which is very important to be able to come back to first principles when you talk to employees, your own staff, and everyone around you. So everyone has a clear perspective on what it is you're looking to accomplish as a maintenance team. So number two, speaking of maintenance teams, so it's nice to have a compelling business need, a statement that really articulates well what your department's all about and what goal you're striving towards and driving towards. The key here, though, is if it sits on a shelf or in a book somewhere and you're not having team meetings and bringing this to life, well, you're missing a great opportunity. In fact, you're pretty much done. So if you're using sports analogies, we're talking about unforced errors, and baseball is famous for, unforced. Well, what is an unforced error? Maybe we should take a bit of a step backwards here for a second. An unforced error, obviously, is when one team shoots themselves in the foot. They make mistakes that gives an advantage to the opposite team, to the competitor, without the competitor having to do anything or earn that right to have an advantage. And in the business world, when we have unforced errors, we add waste, we add cost to and frustration. We lose customers sometimes out of these unforced errors, and so we give an advantage. We tip the balance of advantage towards our competitors in a very fiercely competitive marketplace, as we know, and this is done for free. We give them this great gift of a competitive advantage over us in increments sometimes, and sometimes actually in bigger than increments, and unfortunately. And this is obviously all rooted in this idea of unforced errors. Well, okay, so you have your compelling business need. Well, you want your whole team aligned, and you need to have very strong two-way communication with your maintenance teams. My experience is this: production teams seem to be more conducive, and quality teams especially seem to be far more conducive for meetings than maintenance teams. My experience is skilled trades. They like to work in their silos and their islands. They're happy if a lot of them prefer night shift because there are no quote unquote suits walking around and they can just do their own thing. And so it's a little bit of an uphill battle to implement shift meetings for maintenance teams, but it's absolutely completely critical. And my experience is once you get them started, they really want those meetings because ironically, as much as maintenance teams disdain meetings in terms of the skilled trades a lot of the times, but on the other hand, they thirst for communication. So that's the irony of it all. The paradox is they want good communication. And so to facilitate that two-way communication, obviously you want to have these meetings every day, talk about what's working, what's not working, create an inclusive culture, motivate and inspire your team, have some of your team lead the meetings even, and talk about safety, quality, or maybe there's a 1-point lesson or some learnings that are important for the team. So get them involved, get them excited, because these are the athletes on the field, and we want them to be as energized as possible. And I will say this: we're talking about beavers, and we're talking about beavers building dams on lines. But if you were to ask me, what's the worst threat a beaver can do, these virtual beavers can do? And I would say, if anyone on your team, or worse still, if more than one person on your team is festering these grievances and these frustrations, whatever they may be, and they may be misunderstandings, and they may not be rooted in reality in a sense, maybe it's just their reality in some cases. If your employees can start festering these thoughts of unmotivation and dissatisfaction, these are like beavers within your athletes, within your team, your skilled trades, that are really destroying the very front line, the very individuals who actually can do something about all these beaver dams. So the best trick these virtual beavers can do is to actually mitigate the very individuals that can actually bust their dams. So they actually get rid of their threat. And so you enable that by not having meetings. So conversely, having these meetings ensures that everyone's in a good mood, they're all motivated, and people feel rewarded and satisfied. Bottom line is, would you rather have 100% of one person's effort or 1% of 100 people's effort? Obviously, if you have 1% of 100 people's effort, you and I both know that that compounds and you get a lot more than 100%. So that's what we're aiming for with team meetings. All right, CMMS. So this is computerized maintenance management system. And I'm assuming most of you, if not all of you, have a CMMS program in your plants. And so I'm not advocating here for any one particular CMMS. I've seen dozens of them, and they all seem to be pretty good, to be honest. I have my favorite features that if you're interested, and we could talk about it. If you're considering to purchase one, I can talk to you about some features that I think are key to a CMMS. So I'm a little bit critical that way of any or all of them, but I'm just, from a CMMS perspective, you definitely want to have first of all, you want to have a program. You can't be using Excel today. I mean, if you do and you can make it work, good on you. But I think at this day and age, you really need to have a proper computerized maintenance management system, number one. Number two, and more importantly, once you have one, you have to use it. You can't just have it, you have to use it. And this is what I see as an unforced error is most companies, most plants I know have CMMSs, but they're not fully utilizing it, or even probably half of what they're able to do. CMMS is really the hub of it's the nervous system of your department. And to not use it is really to inebriate your nervous system. And then you're wondering why things are in disarray. So it helps in planning and organizing and executing and educating. The whole PDCA process is really grounded in the CMMS. So two things, maybe if you ask for examples, what are some of the signs that it's not being used? Well, let me ask you, your skilled trades, are they inputting all their work, not some, but all their work into their CMMS system so that you know exactly how much how many work orders are being done, which lines are consuming the most resources, what parts are being utilized or consumed at what rate, so on and so forth. I can go on and on, but that's one area. Is you certainly want whether it's through tablets these days or whatever the case may be, you definitely want to be logging all the work, proactive and reactive, in your CMMS program. The other thing is parts ordering. I've seen plants where parts ordering is a free-for-all. And in fact, I'd go as far as saying that where the cost isn't even really controlled. I think the CMMS is a very important tool in order to ensure that every part, well, first of all, to make sure that the right authorizations are in place when a part is ordered, a critical part is ordered, especially an expensive one, but that every part is ordered with a specific intent. And how do you know that? Well, it's ordered against a work order, A. B, it's ordered against a machine asset. So you've got those two things. And then you need the part for this machine, for this work order. And then, it makes sense, right? Then you have a context around why we need certain parts to be ordered. So, I mean, obviously a CMMS can do this and much more, but it's definitely something that needs to be in place and utilized. Error number 4, not using KPIs. Well, there are dozens of maintenance KPIs, and I'm not a big fan of tracking every single thing. For me, it's really about critical 3 when it comes to pretty much anything in terms of plant operations. What are your 3 big bets? What are your 3 biggest downtimes? What is your 3 areas of focus? What are your 3 most important lines or most critical lines? So it's really getting down to the 3, let's call it 3 to 5 priorities. Well, KPIs for me, there are many again, but my favorite 5, let's call it, number 1 is PM completion percentage. So what does that look like? It means you've planned your work and you work your plan. So of all the PMs that you've planned, what's the percent of PMs that you've actually accomplished? And just obviously make sure that nobody's canceling PMs or at least you're tracking that so that it's a real number. You definitely want a real number. You don't want to run into a scenario where you're showing, the CEO or the senior leaders in the organization that your scorecard in maintenance is green, you've got 100% PM completion, but your OEE or your if running efficiencies are 20 or 30, they're well below world class. So the two should go hand in hand. If you're doing the right PMs and if you're actually doing them, properly. Obviously, your lines, you're getting rid of beaver dams, so your line should be flowing. So that's the first one, is PM completion percentage. And then, for me personally, I like to see the reactive versus proactive PM. So right now, perhaps many of you are running 70% reactive and 30% proactive. You want to flip that so that you're 70% proactive, 30% reactive. And you want to be able to see the progress and celebrate the successes with your team. The next one is percent utilization, and that's utilization of your trades. So again, if they're using CMMS, if they're logging in all their hours, then you know that you're maybe you've got 10 mechanics, and 10 times 40 hours, you got 400 hours to account for in terms of your mechanics, and perhaps you're at 360 hours utilized. You've got a pretty good running team. It's rare to get to 100% all the time, every week. But you want to get a good sense of what your how you're utilizing your fundamentally how you're utilizing your skilled trades. In some cases, we compensate from our trades not doing as much with bringing in vendors and outside contractors. Of course, adding a tremendous amount of cost, but we get acclimatized to it, and that's just the way we do things. Obviously that's not the way we want to run. That shouldn't be accepted. Not if we want to be world-class. That is good for an average plant, but not good for a world-class plant. Again, we want to recoup the money that's invested in that plant and obviously operate at the lowest cost possible. Next is BDA. We'll talk about BDA, but breakdown analysis. You want to track your compliance and your completion of BDA. So we'll talk about breakdown analysis in a few slides. And OEE, or running efficiencies, total efficiencies, whatever the case may be. Obviously, the goal is to make sure that there shouldn't be more than a 3-month lag. So if you're actually nailing it from a maintenance perspective, and your maintenance team is busting those dams, and in fact anticipating where the beavers are, those beavers so well, where their favorite spots are, and you're ahead of the game. You've got condition-based monitoring on, and you're doing PMs, and you're leveraging operator PMs, and you're really as soon as those first few sticks are being planted, you're on it, you're removing them, and you're disappointing the poor beavers. Well, your OEE should match there should be a correlation, obviously, with your improvements in maintenance and that's the whole point, right? And your OEE. So that's sort of my favorite KPIs. Not prioritizing assets. So error number 5. Obviously, if you're trying to tackle everything, especially in a large plant, the plant I was running had 6 lines, now 7 lines with a variety pack. So you've got so many lines, so many machine assets, and you have to prioritize. Otherwise, if you try to cover everything, you end up covering nothing. And so with that will drive, what kind of training and specialized training you need for your teams. It obviously prioritizes, with how you use your tools, your talent, your time towards which machines. How do you prioritize your machines? I mean, there's various ways. Obviously, a lot of stakeholders should be involved in this, including sales, right? Because sometimes your machines are prioritized based on what's selling the most and where your capacity is maxed out. If you have a line that's running 24/7 essentially, and it's maxed out in terms of its capacity and utilization, because of customer demand, then you definitely want to prioritize that line. At Pepsi, one of the products that was and continues to grow in double digits is Gatorade. So any Gatorade line has always been a priority. Can lines as well, especially during COVID, there was a big shift to cans. And so can lines became a priority, and not just any can line. There were some can lines more than others. So you really have to get into that as well. Even on any given line, there's some equipment that has no redundancy. In the beverage industry, the filler is the most critical machine. It's usually the bottom of the V curve. I won't get into V curve, but the point is that you're optimizing that machine above all else to optimize the line. So you're really filler centric. So you have to establish what's your most critical asset, even on a critical line, and prioritize your work accordingly. All right, error number 6: not having regular maintenance planning meetings. So different than the daily or shiftly meetings with your maintenance team. Not having regular planning meetings is really around there's going to be a certain amount of PMs that need to be done, critical PMs that need to be done on any given week. There will also be a certain amount of PMs that will come up based on some inspections that have been done, maybe some operator inputs or downtime that's very recent, or maybe downtime that's a little chronic but growing. So there'll be a list of PMs, and obviously in every maintenance department, there's a finite number of resources, time and people and trades. So given that, there needs to be a triage approach to prioritizing the PMs that are the most critical, and obviously in consideration of the most critical assets, as well as potential for being able to take the line down during the week, if possible. So what I recommend is this. I recommend two planning meetings. Definitely at least one, and I'll talk about if it's just one, it'll be the Thursday or Wednesday. But if it's two, it's Monday and then the Wednesday or Thursday. So the Monday meeting, you're really doing a debrief on the weekend, if there was any maintenance work on the weekend, or at a minimum how startup went. So you want to make sure that startup went well, and a post-mortem on the PMs that were finished on the weekend. Were they effective? Were they the right PMs? What is left over that we need to fit in this week somehow? So what critical PMs were not completed for whatever reason? Do we want to have, or do we need to have, or do we have a regular drumbeat or maintenance window this week? And if so, what should be the key PMs that we need to address in those maintenance windows? So it could be, again, using a filler, for example, if you have a valve that's leaking intermittently, or low fills, intermittent low fills, but not enough to shut the line down there and then, although I would typically advocate for that, but not enough that you should shut down the line there and then, because maybe you have a maintenance window the following day that's already in the schedule, and you can live with that. So then, you plan that. You plan swapping out the valve, the sniff buttons, or whatever it is, not to get too technical, but then you plan that work for the next day or whenever that maintenance window is. And then on the Wednesday or Thursday, obviously you can do a post-mortem or a debrief on how well your maintenance window went, or the PMs that were accomplished during the week. But then you also plan your weekend work, which is for many plants that are running 24/7 or 24/6, the weekend PM execution it needs to be flawless. So, good planning will enable that. And of course, then you follow up the following Monday. Adding to these meetings is the fact that, and we'll talk about it at the end, is leveraging autonomous maintenance PM, so your operator PM. So you want to plan those out on the Monday, or for the week, or on the Wednesday or Thursday for the following week. What operator PMs do you want to give out that will help us raise the level of our execution from a maintenance perspective? Last, I want to point to the figure in the middle. Work orders. Work orders really touch on every single aspect of the plant pretty much. You have safety work orders, breakdown analysis, loss analysis, CapEx related work orders, AM activities, fast response. Fast response is like your daily shift meetings, quality, any particular LSS or Kaizen type of work orders that eliminate defects on the line. So your work order, that planning meeting for work orders really touches on every single aspect of pretty much of your plant operation. So it's that critical. Error number 7, not using a BDA process. This one I see a lot, I have to admit, because it takes a lot of effort, and it's very interesting how plants generally, it's mayhem when there's a big downtime event. When there's a big downtime event, all hands are on deck. And quite frankly, it's long forgotten the next day. As soon as and the lines are running nice and the river's flowing, people actually high five, we got ourselves out of this crisis, and people are pretty happy and elated, and much too happy to bother themselves with performing a breakdown analysis. Well, breakdown analysis is critical because it's a training tool. So nothing's better than learning from your mistakes or learning from others' mistakes. But breakdown analysis is a training tool. So if you really want to progressively, in real time, improve the capability of your team, one of the best ways to do that is through breakdown analysis. Now, you don't only get to the root cause, but you get to the root cause. So you really drill down to the systemic issues with a proper breakdown analysis. You also put together a table, a breakdown analysis table, a central spot where employees can visit to look at some previous breakdown analysis, can look at the trends, can really get to the plan, do, check, act type of mindset that is necessary for a plant to go from good to great. So it becomes sort of like a center of excellence, and it turns breakdowns into a positive thing. I would advocate start with your 4-hour breakdowns or more, whatever your sort of your average is for major breakdowns. Start with that, then move to 3-hour breakdowns, then move to 2-hour breakdowns, then 1-hour breakdowns, and you should be doing 3 or 4 a month. So if 4-hour breakdowns consumes 3 or fills up that 3 to 4 a month, then that's where you're at, and then you move progressively lower and lower and lower. I want to add the use of an X matrix. So again, if you're using a CMMS properly, you can track your BDA compliance and completion, and you can track your X matrix. So what's an X matrix? For those who may not know, an X matrix is the most valuable tool, or one of the most valuable diagnostic tools in your toolbox from a planner perspective and a maintenance team perspective. And what you're tracking is not just the big episodes of downtime, which are really in our face. When a line goes down for 8 hours, everyone knows about it and remembers it for a while. But there are some chronic issues that might also manifest as downtime events, either minor stops or process upsets, not so much major breakdowns. And these can be as simple and as subtle as, remember, those beavers are very crafty, they're smart, they've learned their trade for thousands of years of evolution. So they're very, very smart. So some of them might be as simple as perhaps your supplier for sensors, your supplier that provides you sensors in the plant. Perhaps they changed some design on your sensors, and you're using the same type of sensor across many, many different types of machine assets. And supposing there's an actual defect on these sensors, and if you don't have your fingers on the pulse, and if you're not using X matrix, you might not capture the fact that these chronic microstops and process upsets that are caused by these sensors are actually adding up to 8 hours of downtime a month, or could be even 40 hours of downtime a month. You don't really have your finger on that. But with an X matrix, you slice and dice all your downtime based on frequency, based on amount of time, based on equipment, based on component. A lot of different equipment has similar components. And so you'll see on one of these charts, you'll see what component might be contributing. And if you have one component that's contributing a lot of downtime on every single machine asset, then you can call your vendor and say, hey, look, did you change anything on the sensors you provide to us? Because we're starting to see a lot of downtime related to that. And they say, yeah, we just changed our design a few weeks ago. Why? You're already starting to see some false stops and things like that. Maybe the sensors are not quite calibrated, or whatever the case. The program's old or has to be updated, whatever the case may be. Or maybe they're defective. So then you have that conversation and you caught it early. So you outsmarted the beaver, and nothing feels better than outsmarting a beaver. All right. Error number 8, not using operator PM. So we spoke about autonomous maintenance, and I really want to finish off with this particular error. So again, more is better. It's better to have 1% of 100 people's efforts than 100% of one person's effort. And so if you expand the net, if you expand the team, if you have operators who are doing visual PMs, running PMs, and they're doing general PMs really to use their eyes, ears, nose, senses to keep their finger on what is changing in their process. The beauty of that is you educate your operators to a higher level of knowledge and of thinking, and they're more apt to buy into plan, do, check, act and Kaizen and improvements. So they're more engaged. They're learning more about their equipment, so they're less prone to create minor stops themselves as a result. They know their equipment, so you will get input, whether it's levels of lube, or whether it's fraying conveyors, or shards from a gearbox that are falling on the ground, that are accumulating on the ground. Now an operator writes down, there's some metal shards from this gearbox that's starting to accumulate on the ground, or whatever mechanics or electricians might miss. While you have operators who will catch a lot of these defects and provide the information necessary to act on it right away, before the dam stops the river, you're acting on those things. Very important tool to have operator PMs on every shift, across every shift, ideally through some kind of iPad or tablet to facilitate it. But hey, look, it can be a paper process. That's fine too. I want to add to this. If you have operator PMs and you're not following up on the observations, then you're really actually making more damage than you are adding any value. So if you have operator PMs, if you're introducing this process, please follow up on those items. You must follow up on those items. So when operators come back the next day or the next week at least, that they see that there was a repair, so it follows up on their observations. Of course, that's only going to light that process on fire, ignite that process, and make it even more robust. So in summary, what got us here won't get us there. And if we want to get there from here, we have to do things a little bit different. Sometimes we have these processes, but we're not following them. So what are the 8 unforced errors that often cripple our maintenance departments and stymie our progress to world class? Well, not having a CBN, not having regular meetings with your team, not using CMMS, not using KPIs, not prioritizing your assets, ABC, not having regular maintenance planning meetings, not using the BDA process, not using operator PMs. What does that all amount to? Getting stuff done. Now, some people will use a different word for the S, but getting stuff done. We definitely want to get stuff done. That's the bottom line here. And all these things, all these process-oriented and people-oriented steps, if you will, or practices, these are all geared towards getting stuff done and getting stuff done efficiently and effectively. So we don't only want to get stuff done, but we want to get the right stuff done. That's what the TR is, the right stuff done. Why? Because by doing so, we bust the dam, and that's what we want to do. We want to bust the dam. So there we have it. We've got this beaver now because we've gone through all these unforced errors and we've corrected them all and we're controlling what we can control. And you've got a beaver that's very frustrated. He doesn't look too happy. He's sitting there with a log, doesn't know where to put it because we're all on top of it. So he seems very frustrated, poor thing. But that's okay. I'm sure he won't stop what he's doing because, you know, beavers, they naturally just build dams. So he'll continue doing what he's doing. He'll just work a little harder. But, you know, this is that cycle on the left that we have. You know, your line's running really well today, but tomorrow, because the red arrow shows that there's this dynamic tension going on all the time, this dynamic equilibrium where the beavers continue to look for opportunities to build dams. And what do we have to do through these best practices? We mitigate those dams. We bust those dams. We find sticks before they become a dam, and we enable that river to continue to flow. And what is that? What is that called? 100% uptime. And that means our plants are running as they're designed to do. So that's everything from me right now, Mario and everybody. I'm really delighted to take any questions that you might have.
All right. Thank you very much, Les. Lots of great information provided in your session. And as someone who's really into sports, using the unforced errors analogy really hit home on my end. We'll now move on to our question and answer part of the session. If anyone has any questions for Les, don't forget to post them in the Zoom questions tab below. We have had a couple that have come in during Les's presentation, so let's start with the first one. Would it be possible to recommend some CMMS programs for a company to look into with the maintenance crew?
Yeah, so I'm going to shy away from actually giving any particular brand of CMMS or advocating for any particular brand. And the reason is because I've seen quite a few and I've used quite a few. And for the most part, I have not seen a bad one. Some do things better than others. And I would say this, you definitely want a CMMS that's easy to use, because the barrier to use is often the user experience. And you know, typically you're still dealing with a generation of trades oftentimes that did not grow up with you know, this kind of use of technology. And so bearing that in mind, you definitely want a CMMS that is easy for people to use. I would say you want a CMMS that's compatible with all your other systems. So if you have some legacy systems or an ERP of some kind, or maybe if it's part of the ERP, then then it's fine. Then you're right there. But you know, it should be able to talk wise, because when you order parts and things like that, you want to be able to use your CMMS to order parts, and your procurement and everything should be sort of automatically feeding the MRP and your and talk to all your systems. So that's important, as well as you want to be able to have a CMMS that gives you real time, or at least is easy to pull KPIs, so that you have a dashboard, especially if you have multiple plants, that you have a dashboard where you can compare plant to plant and share best practices from. It's not to put down a plant, it's to share best practices so you can bring up the plants that maybe not following the best practices that the well-running plant is, and you learn from each other through time. So I think that's important. And then I would say the last thing is make sure that you have a CMMS that facilitates an X matrix and the BDA process. I think that's important.
Right, sounds good. What connection would you recommend with functions like reliability engineering, referring to the people that look at your numbers and try and help maintenance to improve?
Well, that's critical. So back in the day, we relied on tally notes. I remember myself standing at certain parts of a line, just keeping tabs of how many microstops there were, or bottles. Say when I was working for Molson's, bottles that were going into a soaker, and when bottles fell, that was a defect. And even if we were able to pick it up before it caused downtime, we were all doing tally things. Well, I think today there are so many tools available to reliability engineers that they can leverage. But if nothing else, this is my advice to reliability engineers. And I know it can sound harsh. At least my experience is it's often come across as harsh advice in real time when I'm in a plant talking to an individual, because sometimes reliability engineers, they think a lot of the work that needs to be done is behind a desk. And quite frankly, it's like that Gamba mindset. You got to go out where the work is, and you got to be out there. So it really, for me, if you don't enjoy the work on the floor, if you don't enjoy being out on the floor, then you're missing the point. It's like being in sales and you're not out in the trade. So the fact of the matter is, my biggest advice to process engineers is get out on the floor 80% of the time. And whenever there's any defects or deviations, you're there looking for continuous improvement opportunities. But leverage technology like line monitoring systems. So if you have a line monitoring system, then you can use it. Oftentimes, plants that have line monitoring systems that are tabulating in real time automatically all the downtime that's happening on all your lines. I've seen plants where that's not even being used. So you have this beautiful tool and it's not being used. So reliability engineer should be looking for trends, looking at all the data, mean time to repair, mean time between failures, looking to make sure that you have some kind of V-curve or some optimized flow on the line, making sure your line's very balanced. So these are some higher level tools. Make sure your line's balanced. Make sure that you have training in place for everybody. We didn't talk much about training. We touched on it a little bit when we spoke about prioritizing your lines. But I could talk, because it's its own pillar, right, in TPM. So you have your capability pillar, your training pillar. So this is very critical, that a process improvement engineer looks at all opportunities that might be contributing to downtime, and training might be one. So I think the key is to be out on the floor, to really follow that data very, very closely, and to look for any and all opportunities that can optimize your production line with the tools at hand, feeding all these processes here, because that would be instrumental to making sure that you're doing the right PMs, the right work in the right places on the right machines.
All right, sounds good. We got time for a couple more questions. Do you have any insights on the top tools you have seen emerge over the last few years that help leaders manage their lines? Anything around downtime tracking and KPI monitoring?
Yeah, no, sure. Yeah, so there's a proliferation of line monitoring systems, for one, that enable you to, again, tabulate mean time to repair, mean time between failure, your mean time to get your line back up and running. So how much buffer do you have on the line? A lot of food, not all, but a lot of food processes have buffer built in. It could just be a long conveyor. So that would be one thing. Optimizing your labor balancing. So looking at your labor, in some cases, depending on the process, it could be, if it's frozen food, for example, I think you're looking to really optimize your labor and level set where your operator should be and how many you should have. Another tool that's really quite effective, which has taken on it's an sort of accelerated in terms of what I can see in plants, is condition-based monitoring. And I think we're going to talk about AI in a few minutes, but condition-based monitoring with powered by AI. And this technology will give you signals and smart signals in terms of when, how long. It even tells you, how many days or how many hours or how many weeks you have until this dam is finished and your line is stopped, if you will. So these condition-based monitoring systems are incredibly effective today. Again, there's a lot of technology, and if you're not using it, you're just getting to a dead end faster. You're just getting to nowhere faster. So you have to use these tools. I've often seen condition-based monitoring emails sent out to everybody only to stop the line stops, the part breaks, and everyone looks at each other. Well, who got the email? I didn't get the email. Did you get the email? Oh yeah, we got it when it was at yellow and then it turned red and we still didn't do anything or whatever. So yeah, there is technology. Those are the basic ones. But I'm going to say this: if you don't have the basics, the process and people basics in place, and good design on your machines, that's a whole other story with early management. Then you got to work on that first, and then the technology is the icing on the cake just to get you to an even higher level.
All right, so we got about a minute to go. So if you can just quickly answer, what factors typically lead to these errors occurring in the food and beverage industry specifically?
Right. Well, I guess the most important factor, there are two actually. I would say leadership. If you look at the list of 8 unforced errors, there's definitely leadership theme through all of that, right? Having the right CBN, having meetings occurring, and being able to communicate out the priorities, being organized and planful. And so there's a lot of leadership component. I think that's an important one. And the other one is having a continuous improvement program deployed, whatever it is, having a robust TPM or TQM or Lean Six Sigma or some X company way or whatever you want to call it. But you definitely want to have a robust continuous improvement program in place, which drives this activity. And oftentimes the process improvement engineer or engineering team will lead those pillars or will lead the program, CI program, to ensure that it sticks, and that the tendency to not do things the right way is mitigated. So that would be those would be the 2 fundamental factors that will support executing on these areas that we spoke about today.
All right. Thank you very much again, Les, for a great session, answering the great cross-section of questions that came in from our attendees. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.